It looked like it was mine. I don't know what it was. It was a flying saucer or what it was. It wasn't an airplane. It was not an airplane. It was down off the road.
You're listening to Pursuit of the Paranormal podcast with your hosts, Ash Ellis and Greg Tomlinson.
Hey Ash, how you doing?
Very good, very good. Just finished listening to your talk you gave to the ASAP webinar about poltergeist and UAPs. How did you find that?
Intense, I'm not going to lie. It was good fun. I had a lot of information I wanted to get through, and I think I got through it all without overdosing people on my thoughts on poltergeist activity and the UAP connection. Although the UAP connection came at the end, really. It was just more of a tag on. But anybody that goes to Parachat in November, this is the basis of our talk in November. But it'll be more of a poltergeist and UAP, be more of a mix.
Yeah, definitely.
So anybody who caught it now has probably had the full Reader's Digest version, and they'll be getting the little pamphlet version. And Parachats, we've only got about 20 minutes to talk, I think. So
yeah,
but I'm sure it'll be cool. And that'll be our first one that we're talking to together properly.
It'd be cool.
Instead of separate, because we've talked at separate. You talked to ASAP as well before. So, and our guest joining us, who we will introduce in a bit, she's also spoken on ASAP. So,
awesome.
All is good. All is good.
And you'll be able to watch that on the ASAP YouTube channel, I believe, shortly.
Oh, okay, cool.
It gets
cool.
uploaded. You don't need to be a member to watch the YouTube ones. I think you can just tune in and watch it.
And when I first logged in, and after I got over my Zoom login problems, as always, Christian was on there as well, Christian Lander, that we'd spoken to right in the early days of the podcast. And then as I was talking about some of the stuff, about some of the paranormal activity that happens during poltergeist activity, about things spontaneously setting on fire, and I covered off Keith Linder in there as well that we spoke to about Bothell Hell House. So maybe we need to touch base with him again at some point and see if he's still on that. So you were also out with My Haunted Project.
Yes, so that'll be out now to watch on the My Haunted Road Trip.
On the 8th of August.
Recent episode. Yes, that would come out
last week.
Yeah. So went to Cannock Chase with Danny, Harry and Dan Caravan from the My Haunted Project, and we filmed. It's just a great night. Guys are so funny, and some really interesting stuff happened. Fortunately, I missed most of it because a lot of it was happening while I was doing Yestas. So we kept using me as the vessel for the Yestas. Yeah. And when I come out of it, they're like, "Oh my god, you won't believe what's been happening." And I was like, "I don't know." So I need to watch the episode to know what happened because I didn't see it. But obviously it was all filmed. So make sure you check that out on the My Haunted Road Trip.
And then last Tuesday, the 7th, 6th, I don't know whatever day it was on 5th. I surprised you, Ash, by turning up at your UFO meet in Manchester when I live in Oxford. So
very nice.
That was a bit. It was. And then once we'd done the UFO meetup, we went across the road to a cemetery and done a paranormal investigation with Sarah and Emma from To Investigate. And that is where our new profile picture on social media is taken from, that cemetery, a Gothic cemetery in Sale. So our guest today is Dr. Rachael Ironside, Associate Professor at Robert Gordon University and leading voice in the study of supernatural society and storytelling. As the interdisciplinary theme champion for inclusive and creative societies, she not only leads the BA Honours Events Management course, but also spearheads research that deep dives into how folklore, dark tourism, and spiritual heritage shape our collective experiences. Rachael's academic journey explores everything from supernatural, subcultures, and spiritualism to the role of place and social interaction in paranormal experiences. With a background that includes running ghost tours and leading a paranormal investigation group, she brings a rare blend of academic insight and lived experience to the world of the unexplained. Get ready for a fascinating conversation on how stories, spaces, and communities shape our encounters with the paranormal. Hopefully, I did you justice there.
Yeah,
You
thank you. I feel
Rachel,
like
Rachel.
Rachel's fine. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
No, that's a lovely introduction. So thank you very much. More than I think I deserve.
No, you're welcome. You're welcome. And thanks for putting up for everything that you've just put up with for the last 10 minutes while we try and get this shambles of a podcast going. It's not a shambles, really, an edit. Ash edits it perfectly.
You'll never know.
You'd never know. So, welcome along and thanks for joining us. You are actually our third Doctor in about 3 weeks that we've spoken to. How we've managed it, I do not know. Considering my academic background, I have no place speaking to a doctor without a medical condition.
Yeah, well, thanks. It's lovely to be here. That's it, yeah.
So, as I alluded to, that you bring this blend of academic insight and lived experience to the unexplained. So, we'll start right at the beginning before we get on to sort of the doctorate stuff that you're doing now. What got you interested in the paranormal, and did you have any paranormal experiences growing up?
Yeah, sure. It's funny, I knew this was going to be part of the question from listening to some of the previous episodes, and what you'd mentioned when you got in touch, and it sort of gets you thinking, doesn't it? About you reflect then on where you've come from and how you got to where you do, and I think I suppose like everyone in this sort of field, your journey is not necessarily kind of straightforward in terms of where you are, but yeah, I mean, again, like a lot of people, I think that whether that's in the academic field or paranormal investigations or the sort of more commercial landscape, I did have experiences growing up, particularly when I was in those kind of teenage years, again, kind of not unusual. And I think that certainly shaped my interest in the supernatural and in particular sort of ghostly experiences. So I'd say most of my interest has been more towards to ghosts and that sort of aspect of the paranormal, although I've always had that kind of wider interest. And then I suppose I grew up, in that kind of era of most haunted. So I know that was mentioned on a couple of the episodes I listened to of, how that's influenced people to get into investigating. So I was very much one of those households where that was on the telly in the evening, and we were watching that. So that was certainly an influence. And I think the other one was, I clearly remember from being younger, Strange But True. And that was one of those programs that really stuck with me. I know when I've sort of heard of the people speaking about those kind of cultural influences that led them towards this, I think quite a few people talk about things like Ghostbusters and those kind of programs. For me, it was less the fictional side, and it was more those kind of real in thingy programs like Strange But True, where it's people's kind of real experiences being communicated or investigated. So definitely kind of grew up with that kind of media, and I think that was probably pretty influential too. So so that was certainly kind of early days. So I studied at the University of Aberdeen for my undergraduate degree, and I suppose that was the first time that I kind of got involved with investigations. There was a flyer, a sort of notification that came out through the university's bulletin looking for people to set up a paranormal investigation team. So this was back in sort of 2007. So I went along to that meeting. We ended up putting together a group of people who were interested, and then I did a few years of being involved in that group, and then running that group in the kind of the latter sort of couple of years of it. So we did investigations primarily around Aberdeen. I also did some in York because that was where I had sort of family based down there. So those were the kind of primary places. And then I suppose out of that, I also set up ghost tours in Aberdeen as well. At that time, there were no sort of regular history tours or ghost walks either. So it was the kind of first time that Aberdeen had a regular ghost walk going on. So and that was in kind of the last couple of years that I was at university doing those. So that was kind of 3 or 4 years, I suppose, of doing investigations, and then also starting to run some paranormal events. I moved down to York. I did some paranormal events down there. And I also started my doctoral research, my PhD at the University of York. And that was as part of what at the time was called the Anomalous Experience Research Unit, which was led by Professor Robin Whiffett in the Sociology department. So, and that's where I did my doctoral and PhD research. And I suppose it's been kind of 15 years now since then that I've been involved in doing various bits of research, which you kind of outlined at the start there in terms of its sort of broad nature, looking at paranormal experiences and also looking at the kind of relationship between paranormal experiences and place and storytelling and heritage as well.
Cool. So just want to go back a little bit. You said that you had some paranormal experiences growing up. What sort of things did you experience? Did you see stuff? We spoke to Kate Sherrill last week, or the week before last, and she had like a classic kind of poltergeist experience. So was it anything as dramatic as that, or?
Yeah, no, it wasn't. I would say the primary experiences I had when I was younger, and we're kind of talking around the sort of 11, 12, 13, 14, that sort of age, were started, I suppose, with what you might call kind of paranormal dreams. And you reflect back on these things and you think, well, they were maybe just dreams. They were maybe kind of night terrors or, forms of sleep paralysis, if you want to be skeptical about it. But at the time, they felt terrifying. And those dreams were, I had a regular dream of these 3 dark figures that would appear in my room, and they would come towards the bed. And I never really knew what was happening, but it terrified me, having those. And I would wake up and I would be really scared by that experience. So I had those kind of regular dreams for a period of time. And I was also plagued, I suppose, at that time. I don't know if that's the sort of way to speak about it, by a sense of presence, so particularly at night time, I would get an overwhelming sense of not being alone. And that kind of led on to, I suppose, a fear of being in the dark, a fear of nighttime as well. So that kind of plagued me for quite a long time, I suppose. And then in the sort of latter teenage years, I had quite a more profound experience, I suppose, when I moved up to the Isle of Skye when I was 14. So quite a long, I was down in Oxford, actually, and then I moved up to the Isle of Skye, and we ran a horse riding stables up there, and we used to transport horses, for various reasons, kind of to different parts of Scotland. And on one of those trips we visited, and I actually don't remember what the place was called. I remember it was near the borders, and we stayed in an old, a hotel which was in an old building. And it's annoying because I cannot remember what this place was. And I would have been, I think, around sort of 16, 17 at the time. And I went to bed that night, and I felt, as I was lying there, I got that overwhelming sort of sense of not being alone. I felt the covers at the bottom of the beds sort of lift up and then fall back down again. And I sat up and I turned every single light on, even the television, everything went on. And I saw what looked like a pencil outline, is probably the best way to say it, of a kind of hunched over figure very quickly run past the bottom of the bed and towards the window. And it totally freaked me out. I ran out of the room. I ran into the bathroom, which was separate to the room. It was sort of one of these hotels where your bathroom's separate. I stayed in there for a long time, and I couldn't get back into the room, and I ended up having to wake up my boss, who, and as you can imagine, when you're a teenage girl, waking up your boss to tell them that you can't go back into your room because there's something in your room that you can't explain. And they had to stay in the room with me that night because I couldn't go back to sleep, and I couldn't, and the next morning we asked if there was anything in the building, and we were told not to worry because it's what is in the building is not in that room. But it was a figure. Sorry, the haunting was associated with a hunched over dwarf figure that was associated with the property. So that was very strange because it kind of connected those. We hadn't told them what the experience was. We just asked, and then they'd kind of explain this. So that was probably the first kind of really sort of profound experience like that which happened. So that definitely got me interested in what was going on.
I definitely think that because you provided the information before they told you about it, that's definitely something that increases the credibility of your experience. And we do find that everybody's experience is very personal to them. So for you to have an experience that, say, it's personal to you because it happened to you, but it's also an experience that other people have had similar experiences in the same location. That's pretty mad. That is pretty mad. How are you feeling when they told you that? When they told you not to worry, this is another part. I mean, that's not the most comforting, I wouldn't have imagined. But how did you feel when what you had seen and your experience was actually validated by somebody that had no idea of what you'd seen until you told them?
Well, I think we're aware, aren't we? It's human beings, social beings, that there's a kind of cultural skepticism to these kind of experiences. So I think you're always looking to sort of legitimize those experiences, and as you say, give them credibility. So I think when you do get that to you anyway, that kind of legitimizing thing happen, then it makes it more meaningful, doesn't it? It becomes a more meaningful experience. So it's one of those experiences that sticks with me because there was that background, I suppose, that helped to legitimize it for me. I mean, you could come up with rational explanations for the experience that I had, but at that moment in time, it certainly was more meaningful to me, and still is meaningful to me because of that.
Did you have any experiences whilst at the University of Aberdeen? We've spoken to quite a few people where they've had at university, they've had a lot of things happening in the halls and in the university itself. Anything that you experienced at Aberdeen? Is that an old one? It sounds like it might be an old.
It is, yeah. It's one of the sort of older ones in the UK. I think it goes back to the 1400s, late 1400s. The University of Aberdeen. Not in the university itself. I wasn't staying in halls. I was staying on Marshall Street, which is actually a very kind of old street in Aberdeen. It was where the gallows was erected at the top of that street. So there's a good phrase in Aberdeen, if you're into your history, that says if you're naughty, you'll end up looking down Marshall Street. And it's because the gallows were erected at the top there on a temporary basis. So they would sort of go up and down depending on execution. So yeah, lived in out of halls, but obviously because I was involved in the investigation group, that I did have experiences associated with being part of that group in some of the buildings that we investigated. That included Aberdeen Toll Booth. I think you've been to Aberdeen, is that right? On a pub. I haven't been able to listen to the episodes, but I noticed there was a pub crawl of some of the Aberdeen pubs.
So the pub crawl was, that was us. We would research these particular pubs ourselves, and then so we haven't actually been to them.
Okay.
Well, not the ones that far up north. When we get to Oxford, probably yes, and Manchester way for Ash. But unfortunately, I've never been to Scotland.
Ah, okay. Well, there is a good dark history, obviously, in Scotland, but Aberdeen's got it's one of these places that doesn't shout a lot about its history and its ghost stories, but it's got a fabulous kind of dark heritage to it that's sort of right in the city centre and then extends out into the Shire. So and we were lucky because back in 2007, it was at that kind of early stages of investigation groups. So we were still in that time where you could go and approach people to investigate their building and you didn't have to pay. People were genuinely interested in hosting you for the evening and seeing what you found. So it was a nice time, I think, to be doing investigations. So we investigated the Aberdeen Toll Booth, Aberdeen Central Library, Fyvie Castle, the Old King's Highway was one of the pubs. I don't know if that was on your pub crawl, but that certainly has some interesting ghosts attached to it, some ghost stories.
Interesting. A lot of pubs have a paranormal history of some kind, especially toilets as well. I mean,
Yes.
toilets in pubs. So you mentioned that you got involved in this group. What kind of students were part of this group? Because it's a subject that everybody across sort of all genders, races, countries, everywhere of all aware of the paranormal. So what? And at university, it's like a microcosm of different countries, races, genders, everything. So what kind of mix of people did you have in your little unit?
Yeah,
I
oh
find
God,
it fascinating that there
I
was like a
know.
group, a paranormal group at uni. I wish
Amazing.
I'd gone to
Yeah.
uni now.
This is kind of casting me back now to, so we had a real mix, actually, thinking about it. So it was a group that kind of started in the university, and then we did get a couple of members that joined from outside of the university. We had someone who was an ex-police officer, and then someone who was sort of just genuinely interested in doing investigations. So it kind of extended beyond the university after a wee while. But in terms of the students, we had one who was a computing student, we had one who was a physics student, we had film, I think we had, I'm sure it was philosophy. I was doing management, so it was a real kind of mix of people. So maybe not necessarily what you would assume. It was, and having the physics student was really interesting. He used to come up with some really kind of quite bonkers ideas about the ways that you could, test the environment and, potentially manifest a ghost through physics. We never got to that point because I think he required this large ionizer or something and a secure room, which was never quite possible. But yeah, he used to come up with some quite harebrained ideas, which was great.
It's interesting you say about creating an environment, because as part of me doing some research into the poltergeist stuff that I've been talking about, it was actually looking to create an environment in a location that is typically known to cause paranormal events. So, like an EMF spike, cold spots, um, all those kind of things to try and generate what is perceived to happen when a paranormal activity happens. So it's interesting that you say that even back then that the physics student was thinking of a way of inducing the
Yeah,
spirits, as it were. So what
yeah.
was everybody's thoughts on it? Because obviously you've got the physics person who's obviously trying to put rational, I imagine, trying to almost debunk some of it. I suppose I don't know. And then you've got like life science. You've got an ex-police or policeman,
Mhm.
um, all lending their different views.
Yeah,
What?
we had quite a balance, I think, in the group actually between those that were kind of actually the computing science student was the big debunker. He was a big skeptic, and he was the one who wanted to initially set up the group as well, which I thought was quite interesting. So he was very much coming from being a skeptic, being very interested in it, but very keen to kind of debunk the phenomena. He was kind of interested in that initial scoping of the site that you would do to investigate whether there were potential environmental causes for some of the experiences that had previously been reported, as well as some of the things that might happen during the night. The physics student, interestingly, was, I would say, on the fence a little bit more, but was just kind of interested in this being a phenomena that may be explained or may not. I would say I was kind of in the middle as well at that point in terms of my thoughts on it, and then we had some people that were more at the I would say believing end of the spectrum. So yeah, a big mix,
Mm.
which I think is healthy.
Definitely. Have you found that, I guess, in the nearly 20 years since then, In your experience, I guess this kind of ties in with this sociological side of things. It's kind of the public perception, or kind of mainstream sort of perception of the paranormal. You found sort of any changes since you started doing it more than years ago?
Yeah, I mean, you guys all know this, I'm sure, from speaking to everyone that you have, that there is, I think there's a greater acceptability that it is something that people do experience, whether it is paranormal in the sense of what we would consider that to be, or whether it is explainable and we can provide rational experiences. These are things that a lot of people experience. And, there's research to support that now, that, a considerable portion of the population have these experiences or have beliefs in these experiences too. And then, of course, you've got popular culture. And I think, social media in particular has played a huge role in it being more accessible, people being able to kind of set up groups and share experiences and link with like-minded people. We have the conventions now as well that, speak about earlier. So there's a lot more opportunity, I think, for people to obviously get involved with these experiences. And then we have the whole commercial side of it. That is a fairly sort of contemporary new thing that's come on the scene in the last sort of 20 years, is the amount of ghost hunting experiences people can go on. Ghost tours, although they've been around for quite a long time, now every city pretty much, and even town has a ghost tour of some kind. And then we get ghost buses and ghost boats and whatever you can kind of imagine up. So there's this whole kind of wider cultural scene that I think has made it much more accessible for people to engage with it as an activity, and also not feel quite as judged, I suppose, for sharing or having an interest in the paranormal as well. The
Definitely.
academic world has changed as well.
That's what I was going to lead on to, kind of the more. It's always been quite difficult. I mean, mainly, especially with like UFOs and stuff, we've seen a big shift in recent years on the UFO side of things to more scientific. People being open, getting doctors involved, and a lot of government agencies and stuff now doing stuff. So I was going to sort of say the academic side of things, this sort of more academical people. What's that been like for kind of that kind of reception?
Yeah, I mean, it's a funny one, because I think you're still conscious that you're doing something that is slightly fringe. I mean, I'm a sociologist that hides out in a business school that kind of studies paranormal experiences. So it is a little bit different from some of my colleagues who are studying kind of, commercial law and things like that. It's definitely different to that. But I think one of the things that I've noticed, I mean, parapsychology has been the dominant discipline for studying the paranormal for many years. But I think and I think it's a good, a good sort of evolution is much more kind of interdisciplinary work on the paranormal, and a lot of different disciplines kind of embracing looking at supernatural experiences or stories as being a kind of legitimate area of study. So, there's some really interesting work that goes on in, for instance, geography, Gothic studies, which, it's probably been looking at it for a long time, but it's kind of, embraced the paranormal, even sort of art and historians and sociology and anthropology. And, so there's a lot more happening across different academic fields. And I think that's a really positive thing, because it's exploring all of these dimensions that, the paranormal world is complex. It doesn't just sit in the mind, and it doesn't just sit in belief systems. It affects, a big part of the sort of world around us. So we need all of these different perspectives to try and understand it.
So what about your your studies? How do you link into the paranormal side? You mentioned geography, looking at certain bits. How about your side and sociology side? How does that fit into the big paranormal jigsaw?
Yeah, so there's different kind of approaches, I suppose, within sociology. So you get the kind of big sociological questions around the paranormal. Obviously that's, why do people believe? What happens in our society, which engenders that kind of approach towards the paranormal. I look more at a kind of micro level sociology, so I'm interested in social interaction and paranormal experiences, or at least that's part of what I do. So, and what I mean by that is I'm interested in, or my PhD in particular looked at when people have paranormal experiences. So literally in the moment as they're having a paranormal experience, what is it that they say? How do they say it? What is it they are doing, and how are they doing it, and when do they do it? And really the point of that is to try and look at how our talk and our actions can shape how we make sense of those experiences. So it's really an interest in those kind of collective experiences and how that social environment can help to shape how we come to see and understand experiences as being paranormal rather than normal. So that's where a lot of my work has sat. And that was looking at primarily ghosts and paranormal investigation groups.
Where do you think kind of you can go with this line of work? What's kind of you thinking that maybe in the future what type of studies and stuff you'd like to kind of undertake?
Well, I suppose my research is, well, I'm saying it's taken me in a slightly different back. I'm kind of coming back to some of the interaction stuff, but in a slightly different context. But I'm at the moment I'm quite interested in looking at that relationship between our experiences and places and heritage and storytelling. So one of the things that kind of fascinates me is this notion that ghost hunting creates ghosts, and places become sort of synonymous with that haunted reputation through this kind of interaction that people have through the experiences they have during these sort of ghost hunting events, and then sharing that online, and how that becomes part of the sort of reputation and part of the place making really of certain destinations and certain sites. So some places become really associated with certain types of hauntings because of the layers of ghosts that come out of those places because of the investigations that take place in there. So I'm very interested in that kind of relationship at the moment, and how people change the way that places are seen as haunted, and also how the effect then that those haunted places have on how people experience them.
So do you think there are some places that have no haunted history, but they're marketed, for want of a better phrase, that there is something's happened there in the past? It may not be happening now, but groups of people go in there, something strange happens, or something that wasn't debunked. So it could be a rational explanation, but that then it creates its own folklore for the place. And is there any locations that have come out in your studies that tend to have built this folklore up more than other places? So one place I'm aware of that I would say is 30 East Drive.
I was going to say that one, yeah.
So I've been to 30 East Drive. I did have some weird experiences. I know people have been there that have had no experiences there, and you see online there is quite a mix of people going, it's rubbish, it's the next door neighbor, or the guy who brought it wanted to make a film, and there is the film about it when the lights went out. All these kind of things that perpetuate a paranormal location. And I think 30 East Drive is probably the biggest one for me. Is there any other locations like that you've sort of come across in your studies that have developed this folklore?
Yeah, I mean, I think we did a paper a while ago where we were looking at 30 East Drive, and we were also looking at the ancient Ram Inn, actually, which is a kind of destination which is a little sort of older in terms of.
I've never been so scared in my life. I don't get scared at all. I don't get scared. Me and Ash we go cemetery, we go all over the place, forests, all sorts. But the ancient Ram Inn, the last time I went there, I was petrified. Petrified from the moment I walked in. Something happened when I first got in there and it's the only place I've ever investigated where I've literally been scared to go to the toilet on my own. And I'm a 48-year-old man, and I'm 6'2". I do kickboxing. I shouldn't be scared, and I'm not
Yeah.
normally. But that was horrid, horrid.
Mm.
So it's
But
interesting that you say Barry.
yeah, but it's certainly one that sort of over the years has developed quite a dark reputation as
Mm.
well. You know, I'm very interested in that actually, that, you know, over time, how places become darker in terms of their kind of paranormal history, I suppose, and the experiences that people are having. And I don't know if that's something that you've noticed yourselves over the years, that there is this sort of, you know, I suppose led a sense that it's not enough to experience kind of Aunt Betty sitting in an armchair anymore in the corner of the room. There's this sort of desire to have maybe darker experiences, or experiences that are perhaps more kind of impactful. You know, I remember when we were looking at, I'm sure it was the Ancient Ramin. Yes, it was. And we were looking at reviews, basically, like you were saying, and trying to sort of understand you know, the experiences that people were having, and how that was kind of feeding into, as you say, the folklore of the place. And one of the reviews was about somebody coming out and saying, "Oh, it was fantastic. I left with like handprints on my neck. You know, I had this," and you know, most of the time that wouldn't be considered a fantastic experience,
No.
you know. But in the context of the paranormal, these kind of quite dark and, you know, sometimes dangerous experiences are seen as being a kind of being a good place to go
It's like a
to.
trophy. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And there's something quite interesting about that in terms of how people interact with them. So, you know, and it's important to say, I'm not, when I say that ghost hunting creates ghosts, I'm not discrediting people's experiences. You know, I believe that most people do at least feel like they are having experiences, whether they are paranormal or not, you know. But certainly there is this layering, you know, and every time a group goes in and has experiences and shares those experiences, it's layering onto that kind of folklore and heritage of the place. And sometimes it's changing it, and sometimes it's transforming it, and that can be maybe a positive thing. It could also be a negative thing for certain places. And you know, it's interesting to see how that evolves.
On a similar vein, does folklore have a kind of a part to play in kind of current day, I guess, opinions and what people expect or think will happen?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think storytelling is still a really key part of I suppose the haunted uh, history and desirability of a place, isn't it? You know, and I think the more that's grounded in almost like a sort of traditional folklore, really, or more grounded in stories that go back quite a long time, and then, as I say, they're kind of layered by this sort of contemporary folklore of experiences that people are having. That, I think, builds up an expectation, and it builds up again a way of people seeing and you know, experiencing different places. Um, and I think, you know, folklore, you know, one of the I've done a bit of work with Dr. Jack Hunter, and you might be aware he's kind of in the anthropology side of the paranormal, and he does some really interesting work around the positive aspects of folklore and how people respond to things like the environment as a result of folklore. So, you know, it's sometimes quite a bit of criticism around, you know, what the sort of negative side of paranormal folklore on places, that it can kind of fragment the history and the heritage of a place, which it can. You know, it can change the history of a place by, you know, building up over time. But on the other hand, it can also help people to see places in certain ways. So a lot of stuff that Jack does is looking at, for instance, fairy folklore, and how that can have positive environmental impacts, because people leave places alone if they believe there is this kind of magical folklore attached to it. On the other hand, if you look at somewhere like the Isle of Skye, which I spent some time growing up on, we used to have there's a place called the Fairy Glen on the Isle of Skye. I don't know if you've heard of it. And it's this kind of miniature landscape. So it's called the Fairy Glen because it's geographically miniature. It doesn't actually have much folklore attached to it. Most of the fairy folklore is Dunvegan Castle and the Fairy Bridge on the Isle of Skye. But since Skye's become a very big tourist attraction, lots of people have been getting coach tours and going to the Fairy Glen, and it's developed this folklore because tour guides are telling people that there is fairy folklore there, and that if they go and create cairns and stone circles and color stones in, that this will appease the fairies. And I was shocked. I went back about 6 years ago to Skye, and went to the Fairy Glen, and the whole landscape has changed because of people's interaction with the folklore, because they have moved stones, they've created cairns, they've created stones. So in many ways it looks magical because of these cairns and things everywhere. They're totally fabricated. There isn't the story there. But folklore is a really powerful way of people wanting to respond to the environment, whether that is in a haunted house or out in a field somewhere. So shouldn't be underestimated, I think.
So would you say, you mentioned that you were in the middle on like believing and skeptical. Where do you sit after speaking to people and talking about and studying locations? Do you still sit on the fence, or are you one way?
Yeah, I just don't know. It's terrible, isn't it? I feel like I've been doing this so long, and that the more you're in it, the less you know.
That's exactly what me and
It's
Ash say. We've been doing this podcast for 4.5 years, nearly 5 years. I was the paranormal guy. Ash was the UFO guy, and then since then it's blurred. And we come away from speaking to these people, and we've spoken to demonologists, exorcists. We've spoken to doctors like yourself, and the more we know, the less we understand about the whole. It seems to be this rabbit hole that just sort of gets bigger and bigger and bigger and further down, and I don't even know what
yeah.
what's going on. We've spoken to people who claim to have killed 19 aliens with a samurai sword, people who have seen like little trolls whilst they in their coming into their kitchen whilst they've had Bigfoot experiences. And we've spoken to somebody who claimed to be the gatekeeper for heaven. Basically, he would say whether or not you were the person, you would have to go and relive your life. We've spoken to people who talk about reincarnation and told me I'd been reincarnated 37 times. And 4.5, 5 years ago, I wouldn't have believed any of that. I had my paranormal head on, going, "This is what it all is. This is the ghost. This is the typical ghost. Things move, all good." And now I just done the talk at ASAP about poltergeist activity. We was talking about portals, extra dimensions, and UAPs, and I'm just like, I don't even know what's going on anymore. What's real? What's not real? So
Mhm.
do you see that sort of societal change where people have an idea of something, and then by the time they go on ghost hunts, for example, they sometimes I don't know if they believe more or believe less when they go, because the 30s drive thing for me, I went there and hardly anything happened. I was
Mhm.
sat in the living room on my own doing a lone vigil, and people were like, "You're not scared?" I'm like, "It doesn't feel weird in here. It just felt like a normal living room."
Mm.
So I don't know if it's just the location that helps, or the, I don't want to say mass hysteria, but the hysteria of the people you're with creates the environment in which your body and your mind go, "I should be scared. And if I'm
Mhm.
scared, something weird is going to happen." And then something weird happens, and you get more scared and more scared.
Yeah, I mean, my research doesn't necessarily kind of look at the hysteria side of it, but it does
Mhm.
come back a little bit to the interaction side of things. So,
Yeah.
when I was looking at people having experiences together, what the research showed is that there are certain ways that we respond to unusual things happening, that then kind of draws people in to making sense of those experiences. So I wrote a whole chapter in my thesis, which just, I don't know how it happens sometimes, about that. So the word that. So, and you'll notice this when you might even notice it now, you know, that when you've been on investigations, or if you watch whatever it is, YouTube or TV programs, that one of the first things we tend to do when something unusual happens is we say, what is that? Did you hear that? Did you see that? And that seems like quite a mundane thing, but actually there's something kind of interesting that happens when someone says, what is that, in a paranormal context, if you're all sitting down in the dark. And it gets people involved in making sense of what that experience is. It's quite ambiguous. You know, you're not saying, did you see the man standing in the corner? Did you hear the growl that just happened there? It's very rarely that direct. It's usually quite ambiguous, and that carries a sort of quite a transgressive quality to it as well. You know, if we see something disgusting on the floor, we go, what is that? You know, it's this kind of, it's a word that sort of distances ourselves from something. So so that is something which happens regularly when people start to notice paranormal experiences happening. And then the other thing that we, you know, observed in the research is how people use empty spaces as well. So through their kind of body gestures, looking in certain directions and talk, tend to position experiences that are considered to be paranormal in empty spaces rather than spaces where there'd be an explanation. And again, that kind of sounds kind of obvious. If we were round a table doing a Ouija board and there was a tapping noise, if I was to point under the table and go, what is that? You know, and then we talk about it being a tapping noise, then there could be a normal explanation for that. It was someone's knees tapping off the table, whatever it is. But if I start to point towards the empty corner of the room and there's a tapping noise that, you know, we've decided has come from there, then it has a supernatural potential to it because there is something that isn't there.
It was interesting that you spoke about the interactions when something happens, and the fact that if you point to the corner and said, did you hear that, that it becomes more paranormal than maybe somebody touched the table leg underneath the table. And it's interesting that you mentioned about the word that, and all the time you hear, did you hear that? Mm-hmm. And when you say that, I've noticed that when we've been out, we never say, did you, like you mentioned, did you hear that growling noise or did you hear that tapping noise? It was, did you hear that? Mm-hmm. As if to sort of not lead a question, but also trying to understand what experience that person had. Now, we're fortunate enough that we go out into small groups, me and Ash. It'll be either me and Ash or me and Ash separately, because he lives in Manchester, I'm down in Oxford. My girlfriend, she lives up north, so she'd come down and me and her would go out, and potentially we'd have different experiences in the same place. Mm-hmm. That me and Ash would have a different experience. And we went to a place, is it Leeds, Ash? Keighley
Underground.
Keighley Underground. So there's like this underground sort of museum, and was like a settlement.
Shopping arcade type.
Yeah, and you go underneath and there's like a separate area where people lived. And so me, Ash, and one of our friends, we went off and done our thing in one particular part. And the girls from To Investigate, they were in a different part. And then we swapped over. Now they have, in their investigations, they get very scared. They react to noises a lot more. And they laugh, they have a bit of fun, but they get loads of stuff seems to happen. Good stuff as well. And then we went into the exact same place where they've had experiences, and as there was 3 blokes and there were 3 girls, and we had completely different experience of the night. We approached the investigation differently as well. We have a different technique of doing it to them, And it's just interesting that the people you have around you can create a different energy. Although me and Ash have had some mad experiences, even just on like a Zoom call or on Zencaster. But it it fascinates me that people can have different experiences in the same location and at the same night, and we've had different things happen. And I just wonder if your studies have led to different types of people having more experiences than others. So if people go in there and they're scared of a location, do they have a different experience to some people who go in there and are maybe not so scared, and are interacting slightly differently with each other? I don't know if you've noticed that in any of your work or.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, one of the things that I didn't do with my research on purpose was kind of look at the types of people, so gender and
Yep.
age, those sort of things. But I think what you said there is really interesting. Is it the different ways that people interact? And certainly, I mean, I've experienced the same thing. If I go back to thinking about when we used to do investigations, is there were certain people that we knew if we had in the room there would be more experiences reported, and then there may be other people in the room, and you'd get nothing at all. I think it's part of this could, I mean, part of it could come down to something supernatural, and I'm not sort of denying that is the case, but also there could be a sense of what people respond to and bring to the attention of each other, and interpret as paranormal. So, for instance, you could be in a room where there is lots of knocking happening, and people who are perhaps a bit more likely to respond to that and bring that to the attention of the group may interpret that as being paranormal or supernatural because they're bringing that into the attention and interpreting that in a certain way. And then you may have another group of people who are maybe a bit more sort of calm and collected, shall we say, or perhaps just don't respond to those knocks as being paranormal. They don't bring it to the attention of the group as being potentially paranormal, and therefore they're not interpreted as being as such. So you could have the same phenomena going on that's interpreted by one group as paranormal and interpreted by another group as being completely mundane and just the radiator clicking in the corner. So I think the important thing about looking at social interaction is that we do know that there's things that people do when they are together, that helps to construct the strangeness of experiences in certain ways and helps to kind of allow them to interpret that in a certain way. That doesn't mean it is paranormal or it's not paranormal. It just means that there are ways that we make sense of things when we are with other people. And part of that also feeds into the sort of cultural skepticism side of it as well, because what is that invites other people to get involved in interpreting what an experience is. And as we know, if more than one person experiences something, that seems more legitimate and it seems more credible. So as social beings, we're kind of more interested in other people being involved in that interpretation and not just us going, I just saw a man in the corner, because that might be seen as, slightly, did she, did she not? But if three people come to that conclusion that that strange sound that they heard happened in an empty space over there, then potentially that is paranormal. So, there's a lot going on in groups, I think. And this stuff maybe seems quite mundane and sort of obvious, but actually when you look at it in the moment, it's quite interesting to see how people come to conclusions about something being paranormal or not.
Fascinating. It's like you mentioned sort of the earlier bit about like the mass hysteria stuff, and um that obviously plays a big part in all different aspects of paranormal sightings, UFO stuff like that. Where you'll have a sighting of a UFO that was seen by like hundreds of people overnight, and then we had back in the last year the drones over New Jersey. Like all of a sudden, the whole country, there's thousands of people seeing stuff, and it was all UFOs. It wasn't drones or planes; it was all UFOs now in the sky. I guess you see that quite a lot, I guess. And one question I was sort of thinking about was there seems to be a spike. This is more coming from UFO research side of things. I'm not sure how it is in the paranormal, but there's across kind of history, say especially over the past 100 years, there's a spike in kind of UFO sightings across the globe when there's in times of crisis. It's like during the wars or during times when there's disasters and stuff happening. There's a spike in UFO sightings. Is that something you might have even sort of, I don't know, considered that sort of thing? But is that something that you've looked at, kind of where it's the kind of the what's happening in the world can affect how people are maybe seeing things or interpreting things as being more paranormal than they would have normally? If that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's not something that my research focuses on, but certainly there is, quite a lot out there that suggests that, ghost sightings in particular, or spiritual beliefs, that there are these spikes. We look around the world wars and, the rise of sort of spiritualism around that time, and the likes of sort of mediumship and psychics. And I know more recently during COVID, there are some studies to suggest that there was this increase in people reporting paranormal experiences during that time as well. So there's certainly something that connects people feeling a bit more perhaps unsettled, or maybe seeking different kind of answers, and paranormal events, whatever they might be, sort of UFOs or I was just thinking, because we were mentioning UFOs there, I mentioned Robin Woofert earlier, who ran the Anomalous Experience Research. He's at University of York, and one of his social interaction studies was on UFOs, actually, and looking at how people report UFOs and the kind of ways that they talk about them and draw upon kind of, talking about how it doesn't resemble kind of normal patterns of flight and things like that, to get to a conclusion that this is a UFO rather than something ordinary in the sky. So that's a really interesting kind of paper if anyone's interested in that kind of thing as well. So it does extend to the wider, not just the ghosts. Yeah.
Go on, Greg.
Okay. So what's the future of your research? So you've obviously, you get to where you are now. Where do you see the future of studying the paranormal in like social interactions?
Funny enough, my research is taking me in a slightly different direction at the moment, which is slightly away from the paranormal, I suppose. So I've ended up actually getting involved in quite a lot to do with difficult heritage in prison museums. So I've been doing a bit of social interaction work on how people respond to the kind of most difficult heritage in prison museums, so particularly up at Peterhead Prison Museum that we have up here. But one of the things I'm quite interested in looking at, it's not necessarily from a social interaction perspective, but I guess it's because of the prison related stuff that I've been involved with, is people being drawn to prison environments to have paranormal experiences, because they're quite unique settings, in the sense that the kind of ghosts that you're likely to encounter or want to encounter in those places come with a certain quality to them, which is usually they're ex-prisoners, or they're prisoners who have died or been murdered or whatever it is in those kind of places. So I am quite interested in maybe doing a study to look at ghost hunting in prison environments, or certainly paranormal experiences, the kind of experiences people have there and why they're drawn to those particular environments, as opposed to your standard kind of haunted house or castle, or those museums, those kind of environments, pubs that are out there, because they do have a certain reputation, prisons, I guess, in terms of the ghosts that might inhabit them.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for your time tonight. I know we've had a few technical issues, but it's been really fascinating to try and get an understanding, because it isn't an aspect of the paranormal that we've really looked at. Is the social interaction side, and also like the building of the folklore in certain locations. So it's been really good to listen to you. So thank you very much, and
You're very welcome.
yeah, wish you all the best in your studies going forward, especially with the prison stuff. Prison stuff, so it's fascinating to me anyway. And I know they do loads of ghost hunts, for example, at Shrewsbury Prison.
Yes, and I'm off to Shrewsbury Prison in a couple of weeks to do a symposium about prison heritage. So but yeah, I would, you know, if anyone is interested in kind of sharing their experiences from kind of prison related environments, I would be very interested to hear from folk. So, you know, do get in touch.
Absolutely. Yeah, fantastic. And anybody can just drop us a message on social media and we'll pass that on.
Well, I know I can't drop any names, obviously, but someone that works in a prison setting in the UK, and I might have to be careful what I say, but they, especially when they work the night shift, so many things, and they tell me so many things that have happened. Because some of these some like really, really old, like hundreds and hundreds of years old, some of these prisons, and it's just kind of accepted by the staff, like, oh yeah, that's the night guardsman that walks. Is like, not, he died 50 years ago, but you hear him walking around at night. You hear the keys jangling. You hear the footsteps walking up and down the stairs, like 2 in the morning, when there's obviously all the prisoners are in the cells or whatever. And the amount of stories just from like the one prison this person worked in is just incredible. And yeah, definitely interesting places to go for sure.
Yeah.
I caught my best EVP at Oxford Prison when
Okay.
I was doing a ghost hunt. It was back then, before I was into like paranormal investigating. But yeah, in one of the cells in Oxford Prison, got a clear voice saying hello across a multiple sweep on my spirit box. So yeah, that's quite cool. Yeah, we're fortunate enough to be able to speak to lots of people across different sort of types of paranormal investigations that they do. So to hear it from like the sociology side of it is fascinating as well, because it's not something that we touch on that often. So
Yeah, no, and it's always interesting to kind of, you know, yeah, speak out of the sort of academic side of things, and you know, particularly to, you know, people who are actively involved in doing this still, and yeah, and to get, I suppose, thoughts on what that means when you're actually in, you know, in the moment. So
and
yeah, no,
it definitely give me a different look on locations going forward around. It's 30 East Drive is a classic for me, but how they maybe generate their own history
yeah,
and the folklore attached to a certain place, even if people aren't experiencing classic ghost interactions, that they're having an experience, which then, like you said, on the reviews and stuff, affect how other people look at it. So they go in with the mindset that this is this really super haunted place, even though it
yeah,
might not be, and that
yeah.
then sort of like this circle of sort
It is
of
cyclical. Yeah, I mean,
anticipation, like then something happens. I go, oh, it's amazing. We had knocks all night. There was things happening all night. When in reality, it might not have been that much. But like you said, where they have that social interaction and they say to their friends, "Did you hear that?" And they go, "Yeah, I heard that." And somebody else goes, "Oh yeah, I heard that as well." Or and then they meet up at the end and go, "Yeah, we had loads of knocking. Yeah, so do we." And it could be that they were actually hearing their own knocking, potentially having the same experience, but perceived over different time. So the whole night was full of activity to
yeah,
them,
yeah,
and then it
yeah.
just creates this storm
It
of
creates a good
paranormal.
story, doesn't it? It's, you know, when that then gets
Absolutely.
collated into, you know, a report or whatever is written afterwards. And it's the highlights that, you know, kind of come out of that. So, and I think what's interesting when we were looking at the reviews for 30 East Drives, as you say, there are reviews on there where people sort of said, oh, nothing happened. But in a way, that it sort of authenticates the locate. It's kind of a legitimizing thing in its own right, because if everybody was saying we're having paranormal experiences all the time, you'd be skeptical of that as well. So, and I think I noticed the owners of 30 East Drive had responded to some of the comments, and I think one of the phrases they used was our ghosts are not performing monkeys, or it's not Disneyland. You know, you don't come and just get ghosts. You know, that's not what happens. So, and there's something quite authentic about that. You know, rather than come and you'll definitely get a ghost experience. Anyone would be a bit skeptical of that.
But then
You know.
I think to myself, is that just not a good excuse that it's not that haunted there?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
somebody's saying, "Wow," and I hear it myself. You go, "Well, you can't guarantee that anything's going to happen," but then you think to yourself, "Is it that haunted?" If people, lots of people are saying nothing happened that night on the night they were there, the get out clause is they're not performing animals. It might not happen. We can't guarantee it. You go, well, actually, a really good get out clause for somebody who hasn't got a haunted place, marketing
Yeah.
it. It's haunted.
I would say,
That's
I
the,
think ghost hunting events are really interesting. Actually, I sometimes compare them to like whale watching.
Mhm.
Where you can be put in a boat and told we're going to go and look for whales, but the whales may or may not appear. The only difference is that we know that whales exist. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
ghost hunting events have to do something really quite interesting, which is they have to sell something and sell an experience to people around something that they can't absolutely say exists. It's quite a skill,
Yeah,
actually.
and that's what Most Haunted
It's,
done
yeah.
so well for so
Yes.
long, and
Yeah.
then it became what Most Haunted was towards the end, which wasn't. It
Yeah.
was clear that there was additional things happening.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's just fascinating. And we're fortunate enough, me and Ash, and because we've got a small group of friends that are into the paranormal, we don't have to go on public events. We can
Yeah.
hire out the place. Well, like me and Ash hired out a new location a few weeks ago, the Priest Cottage in Leeds. It was a former cottage owned by a
Hmm.
priest next to a church. They had a mortuary underneath. Um, and we were fortunate if we had the whole place to ourselves for the whole night. And weird stuff happened there.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, I mean, public events, I don't know if I'd really go on one again
No.
because just because of the mixture of people, and you can't trust those people. As
No.
bad as it sounds, I can trust Ash, and I trust the girls that we go with. That if they're saying something's happened, that they genuinely believe something's happened,
Hmm. Hmm.
rather than somebody going, "Oh, did you hear that?" and nothing actually happened, and then they
Hmm.
get freaked out, and then these people. At 30 Drive, we were talking, and this couple, bless them, they were like, they're into Most Haunted. That's cool, and they've done nothing but great things. Most Haunted for the paranormal, I completely believe they were the start of the whole modern paranormal programs and the research. But they blindly believed everything they were seeing on TV. This couple, and they were like, they were talking about 30 Drive, and even the organizer of the night, this a proper events company, are like, you do know that's not real.
Yeah.
They were like, what? So it's interesting
Yeah.
how even just society feeds this the folklore, whether it's true or not. People believe certain aspects of that,
Hmm.
and they ignore the sort of the non-truths. They just believe their bit.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how, as social media, COVID changed everybody massively, and
Hmm.
online now is a shitstorm of paranormal, like bullying, um,
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
sorts of stuff. We've got friends that we've interviewed, and he's very divisive in the paranormal world. Great guy, love talking to him, but he rubs people up the wrong way, which he knows he does, bless him.
Mm.
And but people just attack him. He'll say
Hmm.
something and they attack him, and it's horrible to see.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah,
Yes.
it's a strange world, the paranormal world. It's very strange. It's
It
very
is,
strange.
yeah, and it makes it more complicated. The
Hmm.
more people, ironically, the more people can gather evidence, the more people can share,
Hmm.
the less believable it is. And we've got AI in the
Hmm.
mix now.
Oh
It
yes.
used to be the phone thing where people could add a ghost to their phone.
Oh
That was
god,
a
yeah,
thing for a while, wasn't
yeah.
it? Where it was all really like, oh, is that a photo
I
or not, or
still
is it one
see
of those?
photos like that,
Yeah.
and people are like, "This was caught in the background of a." I'm like,
Yeah,
it
exactly.
really
But now,
wasn't.
and now we have AI. Who knows what? It's going to be
Mm.
very different. It's more and more difficult
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
legitimize things, and for
Yeah.
people to prove that what they've caught is legitimately just a camera set up in a room and not something added into it. So it's
because everybody can be a Hollywood director now. You can be a Hollywood filmmaker now just from your phone. So it's difficult, but yeah, thank you so much again. Sorry, we went on a bit there. I do apologise. I wish you all success on your future studies, and it'll be interesting to see what the prison stuff comes out like as well. So
no, thank you.
cool. Thanks very much. Thank
See
you.
you later. Bye.
See you later.
Thanks for listening to Pursuit of the Paranormal, title music created by Steve Yarwood and Ambiinfinity. If you like the show, please follow us on Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, X, and Instagram. And if you really like the show, please rate and review the show wherever you are listening. It really does help. See you next time, and until then, stay weird.